The two lines of infantry drew closer to one another, and the battle began when a Meccan warrior stepped forward, challenging the Muslims to send forth a champion to come forth and meet him in individual combat. Ali rushed from the Muslim ranks, attacked the Meccan, and killed him with a single slash of his sword. A single chant of Allah Akbar rose from the Muslim ranks. The brother of the slain warrior rushed from the Meccan ranks to attack his brother's killer. Before he could reach Ali, the fierce Hamza stepped forward between them and cut the assailant down. 3 more men from the Meccan line challenged Hamza one after another. All 3 met their deaths at the end of his blade. Excited by the vigorous single combats taking place before them, the Muslim ranks charged the Meccans, engaging them in fierce hand-to-hand combat. The wounded were slain without mercy. Meanwhile, Hamza seems to not have taken part in the charge, but prowled the battlefield looking for Meccan warriors to fight. Little did he know that Washi, a hired slave mercenary, was also looking for him. He was hired by Hind, the daughter of Utbah ibn Rabia, who had been killed by Hamza in the Battle of Badr, and now she wanted revenge. As Hamza engaged another Meccan champion, Washi found him, threw his javelin, and pierced right through his body. Hamza charged Washi, but before he could reach him, he collapsed to the ground. Washi retrieved his javelin and proceeded to walk off the battlefield, having no further business there. The ferocity of the Muslim attack succeeded in breaking the Meccan line at several points, permitting groups of Muslim soldiers to penetrate and begin isolating segments of the Meccan ranks, hacking them to pieces. For a while, their superior numbers allowed the Meccans to hold on to their position. Eventually, however, they began to waver and fall back in a semi-disciplined fashion. It was at this point that the Muslims pressed the attack with great force and ferocity, penetrating through the Meccan ranks until the enemy was cut off from their camp. With Muslim soldiers behind them and in the midst of their ranks, the Meccan defense collapsed. Once more, Muhammad's disciplined infantry had proven that a smaller, highly motivated force could defeat a larger, less motivated force in close combat. Had the Muslims even had a small cavalry contingent with which to pursue and scatter the routed Meccans, the Battle of Uhud would have been a complete disaster for the enemy army. But the Meccan cavalry, commanded by Khalid ibn al-Walid, had still not engaged in the fighting. Khalid hovered near the flanks, moving his mounted contingent about and waiting for the right time to strike. It was at this time that the Meccan infantry broke and fled, exposing their camp. The Muslim attack subsequently lost momentum as the soldiers abandoned the fight to plunder the camp. Many of the archers guarding the Hill of Arrows also joined in the looting, with only a handful remaining at their post. Al-Walid, seeing most of the archers leaving to plunder the Meccan camp, rallied his cavalry and led it at full gallop through the now unprotected gap. Khalid led the horsemen from the front as they turned Muhammad's flank and struck his forces in the rear. 200 Meccan cavalry punched right through the enemy infantry and continued riding, readying themselves to wheel about and strike again. Attempting to regroup along the line of departure, the Muslims broke off their looting and turned around. This provided breathing room for the Meccans to reform and return the attack. Khalid ibn al-Walid continued to wreak havoc behind the Muslim positions, his horsemen riding about the rear, striking targets of opportunity with their long lances. The Muslim infantry began to lose its cohesion and flee, with their formations collapsing entirely. Events went from bad to worse. Muhammad and his bodyguard were now surrounded by Meccan troops pressing the attack with great force. As the din of combat swirled around the Prophet, he was struck in the face with a sling stone that shattered one of his teeth and cut his lip and cheek. and received a sword blow on his helmet, the force of the impact knocking him off his feet. Around him, his bodyguards were being cut to pieces. The Meccans closed in on Muhammad's position. Seeing this, the Prophet's standard-bearer, Mus'ab ibn Umayyah, raised his flag and shouted the takbir to divert the enemy's attention to himself. Mus'ab fought valiantly, but was cut down. Suddenly the rumor swept the battlefield that Muhammad had been killed. A cheer rose among the Meccans. But they mistook Mus'ab for Muhammad, both of whom wore similar battle armor. News of the Prophet's death brought the Battle of Uhud to an end, with the Meccans breaking off their attack in celebration. Meanwhile, Muhammad, dazed from the blow he received, was safe under a pile of bodies, protected by a few stalwart Muslim warriors.